set things up with Jason and Dan, who are gonna do some stuff. This morning, we voted, and you guys said that branch versioning process, partition, shrink to seeds, adjusting partition to fabric are sort of your big ones. But I added 2 dots for everybody, and there's not 2 dots for each one of you. So part of this was that I assume that you didn't put dots up. You may not be using ArcPro. So how many people are using ArcPro right now to maintain maps? Okay, so good chunk. Good. So we're going to go through that process. And with that, I'll turn it over to John and Jason, and fire away.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. By the way, it's encouraging to see how people are migrating. Couple of announcements before we get to Jason. For those of you who raised your hand for ArcPro, how many people are still using ArcMap at some point? Because I got some messages for it. So ArcMap will still be supported until March 1st, 2026. But as of March 1st this year, there won't be any form of patches that are coming out. Now, why I'm bringing this up again is that recently had 2 customers in the Valley who went through security reviews. They were concerned about potential ransom attacks. And the companies that they hired to advise them reviewed their systems and came back and said, if you've got any software libraries that are no longer supported, they need to be off your systems. So what that means is that the .NET libraries that we use from Microsoft to build ArcMap, those were deprecated, no longer supported by Microsoft as of June 22, I believe it was. So in other words, if there's a security issue, they're not going to provide us the patches that we pass on to you. So something to be aware, if your IT departments are adopting a policy that software libraries that are not currently supported cannot be on your system. So that's one thing. I don't think it's going to have much impact for any folks here, but it's just something that your IT departments may be running into. The other thing that is a bit unclear at this point is ESRI, the concurrent licensing system, which is called FlexLM, which was introduced back in the late 90s. The vendor of that software library has been bought and sold, I don't know, 6 or 7 times. And the current holder, which for some strange reason belongs to the Canadian Teachers Investment Association, they have announced that they are not going to support FlexLM anymore, which means concurrent licensing is going away. We don't know the details. I'm guessing we might hear some words next week from the ESRI corporate on this, but there's likely to be a bit of upheaval for those folks that are using concurrent licensing. When we get more details and how we're going to transition out of that, we'll let you know. And so with that, I'm going to pass this to Jason, who was very gracious to come up and support this effort. Jason, explain how, introduce yourself and explain where you fit in all of this. Yes, I am recording.
Yes, I saw it pop up. So
and I think the plan is once the recording of this is done, because we know a lot of folks couldn't make it up with the weather and everything. But we'll make the recording available on the
YouTube Tools Committee,
site,
so you'll get to that from the GitHub site, and we'll add that to our list like we did to some of the classes, so you'll be able to see it.
Okay.
all right.
Well, let me interject one more thing. So the plan is the focus was on our star here. So we're giving him as much time as he needs, and then after that, we're going to have Dan Stone, from the land records team, give any updates or any information he's got to share. And then if we have any time left, I'll do a superficial dive into branch versioning. So with that,
All right,
there you go.
there we go. Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Camerano. I work on the parcel fabric team at ESRI. I've worked on the team since 2008. That was actually the only team I've worked on at ESRI. It's a fantastic team. It's been a fantastic experience working on it, and it's been fantastic to watch the product change from the ArcMap parcel fabric when it was the cadastral fabric at that time to the ArcGIS Pro parcel fabric, which is now what we're going to be showing here today. We had some hands up showing how many people are using ArcGIS Pro and how many people are using ArcMap. And of the people who are using ArcMap, can I see a show of hands of how many people are using the parcel fabric in ArcMap? All right, so that is nobody raised their hands for Dan on the phone. No one raised their hand. No one's using the ArcMap parcel fabric. But those of you who are using ArcGIS Pro, how many are using the parcel fabric in ArcGIS Pro? So it looks like I can't remember how many people were put the hands up for ArcGIS Pro in general, real quick. Everybody who's using Pro. Okay, so it's pretty much all but 2 people were using the parcel fabric in Pro, and our product manager is Dan Stone. Dan Stone, you can go. Let's go ahead and have yourself introduce yourself right now too, so we can hear you on the line. Who might be muted or gone, or one of the two. Okay, well, Dan Stone is our product manager. He is on the line. He's based out of San Antonio. He's been working with the team for much longer than he's been the product manager, but he's been the product manager now for the past, I think, like 3 years. So he's been the product manager of the team. So what I'm going to be showing today is I am going to be showing basically bringing in some new a new subdivision, basically, and we're going to be splitting the subdivision up. We're going to be using the Traverse tool primarily. We're going to be showing like tips and tricks of how to use the Traverse tool, how to get this data entered, showing things like basis of bearing and adjusting basis of bearing using ground to grid within the Pro application. And I want this to be fairly informal. So if there are questions that you have along the way, we have a lot of time here. Feel free to raise your hands and we can step through things at a slower pace. Or if you have questions about maybe certain other aspects of what is being shown, please feel free to ask away. All right, so I've provided this data. Christy here, and you provided the data. And so this is actually data from Polk County, right? And this is a small subset of data. And I was also provided some plat maps that show that this parcel that you can see here, this big parcel here, according to this plat map, 2022-002, it's being subdivided into 3 separate parcels, and then each one of these is also now being wait, get rid of this thing. There we go. Now it's hidden. And each one of these, like this section here, parcel 3, is then subdivided into these 2 parcels, and then this parcel up at the top is being subdivided into these 2, and then the parcel on the bottom left is also being subdivided as well. So we're going to go through the actual record-driven workflow of bringing in this parcel, subdividing it, and then doing record-driven workflows for each one of these different transactions. And I'm going to explain kind of what is going on even behind the scenes, like what the software is doing to the existing parcels and what's happening with lines and polygons. So to start things off, since this is a record-driven workflow, we're going to start by creating a new record. In ArcGIS Pro with the parcel fabric in map, we have this thing on the top left called the parcel heads-up display, or parcels HUD is what I'll kind of be using to talk about it in brief. This is where you can create new records. You can manage the existing records, and there's a bunch of other tools on here as well. All these tools can also be found on the parcel record workflows ribbon, where you can create a new record up there as well. But I like to use this because it's really handy. It doesn't matter what tab I'm on the ribbon. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to say create record. And this is going to be the legal record, meaning that this record, everything that I create or modify will be associated to this record. So any new parcels I create, any new lines I create, they're going to be associated to this record. If I retire existing parcels, those parcels will then be retired by this record. So in this case, I'm going to name this record. I don't know if this is how you guys name your records, but I'm just going to go ahead and just call this, I see that they call them like partition plats 2022-0002. We'll say that that's the legal name of this record. I don't, you guys might have different legal methods of naming these, but it needs to be a unique name based on the plat. So we're going to call it that. We can say what type of record type it is. There's a domain on this field here. So this is going to be a partition plat. And then from here, we have the recorded date. We're going to say that it was recorded on the document. It states somewhere in there, actually says it's 12/14/2021, but just in the interest of time, I'm just going to choose a date. And there are other fields here, and these fields can be extended, and you can have these fields. I can update these fields based on whatever information is provided on the plat. So once I click create, you'll notice that the heads-up display now shows that plan, that record name, and that alerts me that I currently have an active record. So that means a lot of these tools like merge, divide, these tools will now become parcel aware. So when there's an active record, if I merge two parcels together, it's going to do the merging of the parcels and the retiring of the existing parcels. If I do not have an active record, the merge tool is going to work just as it normally does. It's not going to do this retirement functionality. So with this active record, I need to take a look at this plat map. If I notice in the details here, it talks about that the purpose of the survey is partition lands right here, blah, blah, blah. The basis of bearing is grid, Oregon Coordinate Reference System, Salem Zone, NAD 83, 2011, Epoch 2010. So this is basically saying that this basis of bearing that this map is represented at is based on that projection. So one thing I could do, and which I'll do for this first one, is I can go specifically to the map. This is not changing the projection of the data, and I can project on the fly, and I can change to that projection on a map basis. So now I'm going to be projecting the data in the Salem NAD 1983 projection. So I'm going to click OK. And now the data is being projected in what the basis of bearing is being utilized in the plat map. So now I want to bring in, I want to traverse this boundary of this parcel to bring this parcel in to this area. So I'm going to actually go and click on the traverse tool. And I want to set a start point. And I'm going to be creating tax lot lines. And where I'm going to be starting, according to the plat, this is the initial point here on the top left. That's where I'm going to be starting. Now, also in the interest of time, I'm not going to sit here and actually COGO this entire parcel in, because we're going to show COGO in here in a minute as well. I actually have a traverse file, which I can import, that provides all the COGO information for that. So you can see as I brought it in, you can see the lines have all been created. I can see here in the grid that all the lines I could QA this with the actual plat map to make sure everything matches up. This closed distance of 0.02 feet. So this is a very highly accurate traverse. It closes well. And I guess at this point, I'm ready to just bring this in. But first, actually, the other thing about this plat is what I want to do. I actually want to split this here too, because while I'm in this projection that I'm currently in, I need to also subdivide this parcel into these smaller subsections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the parcel record workflows ribbon, and I'm going to click show only active. What this is going to do is it's going to actually filter out all the other layers and only show lines or features, polygons or lines, that are associated to my active record. So in this case, all these lines I created, those are associated to my active record. So that's all I'm seeing. So this is just putting a quick def query on all of my layers. So this is all I'm seeing right now. So what I want to do is I want to start a new traverse and split this parcel based on this plat. So over here on this point is where I'm going to start, and I'm going to draw a line from this point to here, and I'm going to draw this line from this point to here. So this point, if it's created over here, I believe it's right there, 264, yep. So, all right, I'm going to click new traverse, and I want to set my start point to this location where it was split. And I want to set my closing location, because in this case, I'm not going to be creating a full loop traverse. I'm going to be starting at a point, and I'm going to be ending at a point. So I'm going to set my closing location to be this location on the right. And now I'm going to start entering in my traverse. So the first line, actually I have the plats here, so I have to keep flipping back and forth. All right, so the first line is going to be going at 81 degrees, 54 minutes, and 8 seconds to the southeast. And now, since this is using quadrant bearing, I can simply put 2 to represent southeast, 1 is northeast, 2 is southeast, 3 is southwest, 4 is northwest, and I can hit enter. And now it asking for my distance value. I'm going to go 286.95. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to accept the bearing again, because it's the same bearing for the next course, and I'll enter in this distance of 1,110.15 feet. Oops, nope, that's the full length of the line. It would be 823.20 feet. And there we go. We can see that the line now closes on that close point. When that line was created, the end of that line fell within a 1 foot tolerance of that closing point. So therefore, that line is now snapped to that closing point, and a misclose error basically has been applied to those features. This allows for the geometries to change basically to fit and connect to those points, like the starting point and the end point of the traverse. This allows for those lines to snap to it, but none of the measurements will ever change. So that those COGO measurements, those survey grade measurements that are on those lines will never change, even if the line geometry slightly changes to snap to those endpoints. All right, so
that's when I can't just draw it in, because it won't have any record values.
so you can't just
Draw a line, click.
Yeah,
It
you
won't
could-
have any record values.
that is correct. I could, like, that is another way I could have entered these lines. I could have drawn a line, clicked on that point on the far left, clicked on the far point on the far right, and then went into the attributes of those lines and edited those attributes for bearing and distance. Because these values, the direction and distance that you see here in the traverse grid, those values are just being applied to the direction on those lines.
Right,
So that's how they're stored. So you could do it like that. You could click and then just enter the values afterwards.
but you might as well just. Yeah.
Yeah, this has some
Record
extra.
value part
yeah.
of it.
This has some higher levels of redundancy, I guess, in this point, because you can see, okay, this thing is closing, and then I can see my misclose information and those different aspects that you can see that you've entered your data properly. All right, so now my next line is going to be, I'll click new traverse again. And in this case, I'm going to have my starting location be, I believe I'm going to be starting at the bottom here, and I'm going to be closing at this top point. And now I'm going to be entering in a curve. So according to the curves table here, this line C3 is going to be 1:16:15. And this is going to be going in the northeasterly direction, so that it's going to be 1. But this is going to be according to this document, this is a chord bearing. And my direction values right now in my map are set to tangent bearing. So what I need to do is I could change that drop down to change to chord bearing. But let's say we don't always use chord bearing, but this plat happens to have it. So I can use an override. I can just type CB and hit enter. So now that row is going to be using chord bearing for that direction information. And since this is a curve, I'm going to enter a value of 0 in the distance field. That gets me over to the radius. And the radius of this is 211. And the distance, the chord length, is 58. Well, the arc length is 58.89. Oops. 58.89. I'm gonna hit enter. Now I noticed actually right now I see my curve is actually going in the wrong direction. This is not, so if I switch back to the plat, you notice it's going counterclockwise, not clockwise. That is just a mistake here. I can just change the direction of the radius to say minus 211 feet, and that's going to change the direction of the curve. So now you can see it's going in a counterclockwise direction. So now that I've fixed that, I can enter in my last line feature here at 7 degrees, 51 minutes, 8 seconds to the northeast. And this is going to be 230.33 feet. And once again, we've closed within 0.01 feet of the closing point. So we can see that the measurements are highly accurate, and I can accept these results. So there we go. We've got our 3 parcels. We've traversed them in. Now we just have, actually, we just traversed the lines. We don't have our parcels yet. So our next step is to actually create the parcels that fill in these completed loops of lines. The next step in the parcel fabric record workflow is to create seeds. So what this is going to do is it's going to create parcel seeds within each of these closed loops. These parcel seeds are technically actual parcel polygons. They're just in the small seed shape right now. We call them seeds just because they look like little dots. And then at this point, we can build the parcels, which will allow those seeds to then grow out to the area of that closed loop. And now we have our parcels. This new geometry that we brought in is going to be viewed as the geometry that we want to hold as truth to the ground. So we want to align our data to fit this new incoming parcel geometry. So we want everything that you see in the fabric below this to adjust to this new parcel geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to
In this case.
in this case, yes. If it wasn't the case, I could say I want this parcel just to fit into the existing geometry. I could do that as well. So I need to align this. So I need to
So before you go
go ahead.
all good. No one's asking questions. You can ask. If you want to sit back and just watch, that's what.
I do have one kind of like a
Yeah, sure.
structural issue.
Mhm.
When you're co-going in stuff, even if you put in like placeholder zeros and whatever else, because that's what the surveyor represented as a value.
Mhm.
Your data drops those like 0 values, like if you have 100.00, it'll drop to 0.00. Or other things like that. Is there some sort of a reason for that?
On the traverse grid there, yeah, it's dropping it, but like depending on how you want, let's say you always are representing every distance to like 3 decimal places, right?
Well, but that's the problem, right? So in 1890 survey,
Uh-huh.
maybe they use fractions instead of a decimal value,
I see.
right? And so just from my standpoint, I like to put in what the surveyor put in,
I see.
you know.
That would be more based on that would be more of a representative of like what the annotation or the labeling could do, where you could take those values, those decimal values that you might have, and represent them differently visually on the screen. When entering in the data into the traverse grid, it's always going to be numerical based, double based, like double feature, like something, or decimal feature. And then when the line is represented visually in the map, you could have it represented in a different way, like with fractions or something like that. So that's more of a map visualization thing that you could do with that. But the database values are always going to be in the decimal format.
So
Yeah.
you said something earlier at the start about changing the map and the coordinate system.
Yes.
To match the basis of bearing
Yes.
on the survey. That's actually the first time I've heard that out of some of the parcel fabric trainings. How much does that impact how you put the data into the map and how it aligns with the data appropriately? Does it make a huge impact?
Yes, and let me align this parcel, and then what I'll do again is I'll change the basis bearing back, and then I'll import that traverse again, and you can see how different it is from this one.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to click align parcels. And in this case, this parcel is quite a bit off from the line, so I have to increase my tolerance here fairly significantly. So the first thing I want to do is I want to place an anchor point here on this point here on the left. This is my initial starting point. So this is the point I want to make sure that one is locked into place. And I'm going to create links between the geometry that I created and the existing geometry below. Now, I could click generate links, but since this data is pretty far off, where it's like I'm having a buffer of like 20 feet, I sometimes don't trust to generate links with that big of a distance. So I'd rather go in and manually create these links, because sometimes it has trouble when you have, I'll show an example when I get to this other area of this parcel, that it's going to have trouble figuring out which vertex or which turning point is associated to which turning point when automatically generating the links. If this was a lot closer, I would be more comfortable with clicking generate links and then going in and investigating each of the links. So here's one of those examples. So at this point, it's going to be associated here, and this one is going to be associated with this location.
So
that-
does direction matter?
On this, no. Well, I'll explain to you how actually the alignment is actually going to happen. Whatever is selected is what's going to move. In this case, my incoming geometry, the one that I created, that's actually currently selected, and I actually don't want that to move. So I'm going to push a button here in a moment that is going to change the selection. And let's go over here to this corner. Click there. And I noticed when I did this the first time, this one was another one that I definitely needed to create a link. So I think those, oh, no, there's one more. One more link here. So two things. With aligning parcels, the selection is what moves. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to have everything else selected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button, toggle selection to surrounding parcels. Just like that, all the parcels that are surrounding my incoming geometry are now selected. So those are the parcels that are going to move. The other thing I need to do is I want to change my point to edge snapping tolerance from 1 foot to 2 feet, because I noticed that when I aligned this the first time, the existing geometry here is a straight line, but my new geometry has curves. So when this actually aligns and everything snapped together, there was more of a 1 foot distance between those curves and that straight line. So it actually didn't seam it up. But with changing this to 2 feet, it was within the tolerance, and it actually seamed it up. It seams it up pretty nicely. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and click align. And it'll do the processing, and the direction of those, like the question was, the direction of the links, do they matter? They do not, because it's based on the selection of the features is what the direction in which things are going to move. So there we go. We can investigate some of these corners. We can see that everything has now aligned. All right, so I'm going to back out of the alignment, and I'm going to show you what it looked like if I imported that traverse without the proper map projection. So I'm going to go back to the map, and I'm going to switch back to the state plane Oregon here, this one. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go back to traverse, and I'm going to set my start location to that point up here. And I will say import ArcMap traverse, choose the same one. And you can see it's quite a bit off, like much more. I've already adjusted the data a little bit to fit the new ones, which was already slightly off, but this would have been even more off. So what the movement that I already did, it would have been plus this is how much this would have moved. It was pretty significant. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, there has to be a basis of bearing something on this document. That's when I went and started searching for it, because it was like, I mean, some of those areas were like 10, 12 feet off. And it was pretty significant.
That's really helpful. I know we typically use just South 36 like the state plane.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of them come in with ORCS, that can build to. It's like, you know, it's there's some of the ODOT conversion, or the ODOT projections. So that would be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I just want
Just an
to,
apple.
yeah.
Sort of a question or survey to the group. So when I showed this method to our cartographers, everybody was really, you know, they did not believe that that could be possible or control or wanted. So my question to the room is this something everybody would want to do, be able to do? Because I think right now we're more comfortable with the old method of snapping points together, rotating, and then, is that right, Ted?
I think it's more about whether or not the basis of bearing used is going to fit our data the best. Because sometimes we don't know exactly how the data we have in our existing digital map, if that basis of bearing that we're saying it is true to what's they found on the ground, right? So there are some of us who like a little finer control over how we rotate to match what our data is. That's more the issue, I think. As far as using the aligned parcel tool, there's some people that like it and some that don't.
I know too, also, like, the way that we illustrate is we really haven't done anything with conversion or with the coordinate system, but instead we do ground to grid. And we match the line up first, and that way the first line typically aligns with everything else.
And that's kind of what you're talking about with
Yeah.
rotating. You may rotate it, set it bases bearing up, or you may rotate when you're done, but
I apologize. I somehow got screwed up with that second import and I couldn't get rid of the line. So let me just import that traverse again, do the quick split. And this will be a lot
deals at doing
faster.
live demos.
Deals with doing live demos, going off script. It's always fun. All right, let me try this one more time.
So adjusting the outside in when you know your map's not as great, or doing it the other way, is this something it's too bad Donna's not here, who retired last year, because she would be going, no, does this look okay?
Well, I might have a concern about like, so you want the road to remain, and as I see it, right, like, so the road's gonna adjust itself to align with the new import. But you might really trust that road, and you want that road to stay the same. I mean, I just see a slight issue of everything around being adjusted to fit this new import.
So what do you do in that particular case? And again, you keep going. to
Yeah,
get your
I can,
thing in and-
I can talk while doing this too. So what you do in that particular case, I would recommend like things are going to, especially if you start having survey grade control networks in your data, those are going to be the real true representations of where things are supposed to be and what things are supposed to be tied to. So yeah, if the road moves slightly, if you run things like least squares adjustments, the things will adjust to where they should properly be based on the, not only the control points, but the COGO measurements that have been inputted onto the lines. So the more measurements you have on the lines and the more accurate those measurements are, the better things like running the least squares adjustments, adjusting the data with those types of, with that type of high accuracy, the data will start to fit. And those things will start to straighten out.
So could I have entered some points there and said that you don't get to move those points? And what would happen to your adjustment at that point?
Yeah, if I put some
So you put some anchor points down on the bottom and said, look, these are not going to move, and then did it, what would happen? Because that would hit your effort as well.
yeah, there'd be other things. You could put control points on those ones, and control points are held fixed, so those ones won't move as
Sorry,
well.
fixed was the word I was looking for.
Yes, yeah. All right, let me get this curve in here. One, so you get to see the demo again. 116, 15, the northeast one, and this was DB at just zero distance, negative 211 feet, and 58. Oops, sorry. 58.89. And then the last line was 07 dash 07 dash 51 dash 08 dash 1. And this one was 230.33. Okay, and I forgot to set this closing. So you can set the closing location afterwards too, and it'll still snap to it as long as it's within tolerance. So even if you forget to do that, there are ways around that.
So since you did the line twice, is it gonna be a retired record for the one that you messed up on?
Oh, I stopped editing and didn't save, so nothing. That's why I had to go
You
back.
deleted that with their, that messed up your record, right?
If I deleted,
You brought in the traverse.
Yeah.
And you got removed by stop editing. But you
I
just deleted it instead of stop editing.
could have deleted, actually, that would have been probably the
Would
smart
that
thing.
be in part of the parcel record?
It wouldn't have been, because it's all those lines were, those were just lines, and those were created by the record and then deleted by those would have just been completely deleted. I just hit the delete key and then I would have deleted them.
So you've not added to the fabric dealing with anything related with retired records or anything at this particular time.
Yeah.
This is just the features as it exists in this particular record, and in effect, it's sitting on top of your fabric.
Let me just add these links in again.
So as you're adding those links,
Yeah.
can I temporarily add control points? So let's say, you know what, I like my road, it's not the greatest road, but for this, I want it to hold. Can I add those control points, say they're fixed, do the adjustment when I'm done, delete my points?
So like roads outside of this,
Well,
adjustment.
but your south line there, along the south line, could I add some and effectively?
You could, but yeah, if you added those beforehand, those won't move. So you could, you could put
Yeah.
control points
Okay.
down there. Also, is Dan back? He could introduce himself while I'm doing this. Dan.
Yes, I'm here, Jason.
There
Been
you are.
watching.
Dan, I before you may have stepped away. I just when I was introducing myself, I called on you to also introduce yourself too. But you can go ahead and do that right now.
I think a lot of the folks know me. I'll turn on my camera if you guys can see me. Dan Stone, I was out there probably right around 2019, 2020 in Bend. I met some of you guys. Some of you guys couldn't make it over the mountain, but sorry I couldn't be there today in person. But Jason, I'm glad you got to go up there. So introducing myself anyway, I'm the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Product Manager, meaning if there's something that you guys come across and you say, you know, I really wish the Parcel Fabric could do this. It would make my life a lot easier if it did this. Those are the types of things we're looking for. And I'll kind of wrap up at the end, but there's a place that we could put that information in. It's the ideas page. But you can also send me an email if you ever wanted to, dstone@esri.com, and let me know some of the functionality that you guys are looking for.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Yes, sir.
All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch back to the previous map projection. However, now all my other maps, I'm going to be using a different tool to calculate the basis of bearing. Rather than changing the projection of the entire map, I want to just apply the basis of bearing to the features that I'm creating. So the next one I'm going to be doing is plat 2023-0015, which is not that one, this one here. So this is another partition plat, and this is going to be partitioning that parcel 3 on the bottom right. It's going to be creating a small parcel here, and then a split line from the top to the bottom here. So for this one, let me just the map out here that I have.
So you're processing all this sort of as a multi-packet record. You've not committed this to, you've not saved this, and so the underlying retired by record is there, whatever. You're just processing all of these in one sequence.
I am processing them all in one sequence. That is one way to do it. I'm actually going to process it in different sequences right now because I'm going to be creating a new record for each one. So in theory, this parcel that existed here to begin with, we can see we have still that full parcel, and then we have the small partition one. This full parcel, if it's ready to be retired now, meaning that these new parcels are the new current ones, with this current record active, which is the PP 2022-002, I can simply click set historic. And now it has retired that parcel. So I can go down, I can find the tax lines, and there's a layer here called historic, and you can see that that parcel has now been retired. So if I click here with the history turned off, you see I only have one feature. There's no more selection chip allowing me to toggle between. So at this point, we can say we've retired that existing parcel, and these are the new legal parcels. And then that was done according to this one back in 2022. Now these new ones, let's say a year down the line, these need to be partitioned again. So we're going to go to this parcel here. This is a new record. So I'm going to create a new record here. It's going to be called PP 2023-0015. And once again, this is a partition plat. And we'll say it was recorded. Just choose another date and click create. So now we have this new record active. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to take this parcel and copy its lines to the active record. So I'm going to select the parcel and I'm going to say copy lines to. It's going to copy all the lines to the currently active record, which is called tax lot. So now it also has shrunk that parcel down to a seed. So all that information in that existing parcel is now shrunk down into this one seed. So all of its attributes and everything remain in that seed. So when I subdivide this more, I'm gonna have to create 2 more seeds to represent those other 2 parcels. And then when I click build, this seed will come back to life as it'll still have all the attribute information of the previous parcel. I could have chose not to carry that across, when I said copy lines too, there was an option on there to preserve parcel attributes. I could have unchecked that, so then it would have just shrunk it down to basically a new seed. And then I could update that, the information on that the parcel seed as I saw fit. Now, I'm back in, if you recall, I switched my map projection back to State Plane, Oregon. So now I want to actually set the basis of bearing manually, so all my lines will then take that into account. So what I want to do is I want to go to the quality, not the quality tab, I want to go to the edit tab, and I want to choose ground to grid. And I want to choose enter the ground line and then draw the grid line. So my ground line is actually, it's still set from the last time I used it, is this line here at the top. So the measurement information, the direction of that line is 815408 to the southeast at 823.2 feet. So this is my ground, this is the ground direction and distance. Next, I'm going to click next, and now it's going to want me to enter in the grid line. So I'm just going to simply use that same line, and I'm going to click here and then click the endpoint. And now you can see if I go down here, you can see my ground to grid corrections has been applied. So this is my offset and my distance factor. You can also see it up here as well. So now when I'm starting entering lines, I don't have to change the projection of the map, but all the data that I'm going to be entering in, this ground to grid correction is going to be applied. So let's go ahead and we'll flip back. I need to create this line here. So to do so, I'm going to take this line here on the top and I'm going to divide it. So go back to the parcel record workflows tab, and I'm going to click divide. And I'm going to use the divide tool to divide this line from the end of the line. I want to go from the end of the line here. I want to go back 139.17 feet. And you can see based on the preview, this is where the split is going to be. And I'll click divide. So now we've created two lines. I'm going to divide this line here at the bottom in the same direction. I want to go from the end of the line, which is over here. I want to go back 139.13 feet, actually. And I'm going to click divide there. So now we divided the lines. I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to actually create the line like you stated about just clicking the line through. So I could go to create features. I could go to where's it? Tax lot lines. This one here? Yeah, there it is. And I'm just going to do a 2-point line, and I'm going to click this line here on the top, and I'm going to click at the bottom. And then I'm going to go to attributes. And then in here, I can go ahead and enter in that information. I can say this was 09-51-24 in the southwest, which is 3. So I put that there, and then it was a distance of 310.75. So that's just another way that I could have entered the line as you explained earlier. All right, so that parcel has now been split, and I want to go over here and do some more division on these lines, and I want to divide this line. I'll click divide. And in this case, I'm going to be going from the start of the line. So from down here, I want to go up 85.43 feet. Divide it, and I'm going to divide this line from the end. I'm going to switch back to the end of the line, and I'm going to go 147.75 feet. And I'm going to hit enter on there, and then click divide. Now we're going to go back to the traverse so we can have that extra redundancy of knowing where the lines and the features start and end, and whether or not there's a good misclose on here. So what I want to do is I'm going to start at this point, and I'm going to close at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and enter in these measurements, and I'll show you some other tricks for the entering in traverses. So let me enter in this first one. It's going to be going to the southeast at a distance of 233.92. I'm going to hit enter. And the next measurement, if we switch over to the plat and I zoom in, we can see that this first one was southeast. This next one, the way that I'm going clockwise, this direction says northwest. So if I'm just entering in as I see it, the actual line is not going to go in the way that I want it to go. So I'm going to go 25-15-48. And this is going to the northwest. I'm going to hit enter on that, and I'm going to say 16.24 feet. And we see that's going in the wrong way. That's the geometry is going in the wrong way. Instead of me going in and changing those around, there's a new command that you can select the line, right click, and say reverse direction. And you can see the line direction.
So what version is that?
3.1, 3.1 or 3.2. I actually don't know. It's a fairly recent one.
Yeah.
We showed it off at the UC this year, and a lot of people
Very nice.
like that a lot. So that'll reverse the direction 100, exactly 180 degrees. There's some other things that you could do within the traverse, which is fun. I'll do it actually on this one. So this one is going to be 7 degrees, 29 minutes, 48 seconds southwest. So that's 3. And the distance is 130.60. So you can kind of use this distance field as like a calculator. So if you saw in here, let's say it was the measurements had like 60, well, let's say it had 50, 50, and 30.6 feet. Like that's just how it was labeled. But you know it's one straight line segment, and it's supposed to be 130.60. You could just add in the measurements. So I could go 50 plus 50 plus 30.60 and then hit enter. Oh, it actually only will do, I guess it only does one mathematical operation. So I'm also did 50 plus 50. Then I could do 100 plus 30.60 and it'll add. So you can do small mathematical operations in there too, like multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So with that, it closed within 0.01 feet of my closing point. So you can see that not only it's the basis of bearing is being applied, so we're actually getting the correct measurements, that the closures are very accurate. I've got my 2 splits here. I'm going to back out of my traverse and I'm going to click create seeds. And we can see 2 seeds are being created here. The other good thing about seeds, and that they're also used as like a quality assurance purpose. So if I would have clicked create seeds, and let's say one of those lines over there had a small gap between the end, a seed wouldn't have been created because it's not a fully closed loop, and therefore I wouldn't have been able to, a seed would not have been generated. I would need to go investigate and see why. So it's another way to kind of quality assure your data before moving forward. So once those seeds are created, I click build.
So can you move a seed?
Oh yeah.
So that's no problem moving it?
Yeah.
Because ordered line and
So yeah, so for example, let me go back into that. So if let's say this seed that had all that address information on it before, let's say that seed actually was going to be built into this one. That's because this one still had all the information of the previous parcel. I could have done this. I could have just said move. I'm going to take that seed. I'm going to move it over here, and then that's fine. This one here, that was just a blank seed that I created. I'm just going to delete it real quick, and then I'm going to click create seeds again. New seed will get placed here. So this seed is the one that I wanted to build over there.
Did you have to delete it? Couldn't you move it?
I could have moved it. Delete was easier because it was just a template seed that wasn't anything. I could have moved the seed, however I wanted to do that, and then I would just click build, and the same thing would happen.
The reverse line, what will it save as the Kogo activity? Will it save the original one you input or the reverse?
In this case, it will save the reverse direction input because in the actual numerical value, it's going to be going in that direction. If I needed it to be in that other input, then I would have to, in this case, I would not, I could go back in and change it, or the way that I wouldn't have been able to do the traverse that way, because the traverse, you need to have like a full flow. So if it was really required by the authority to say, no, that line, it says northwest on it, then I would have just actually finished it up. Everything's good, just gone back and changed it.
So what's the difference between doing this, creating the seeds and building them versus just using the line work to split the parcels?
I see. So like just creating doing a split straight across.
Just selecting the lines and splitting, having the parcel on is one parcel.
Yeah. And
splitting on the lines into 3 parcels.
I think that there are different ways that I could do this. Like for this parcel here, I can just switch over to the other, this one here. I could technically divide this parcel and I could say, let's just see how well this works. I could take this parcel. Oops, I got the move tool active. See how well this works. We're going off script again. So we're going to create a record for this one. I'm going to say this is what is this one? 017. So 2023 0017 partition plat. Forget to set the date there. It's fine. So I'm going to click divide. And I'm going to say, I'm going to divide this parcel by, so I'm going to say this is the dividing area, and I want to do equal area equal width, number of parts, 1 part, and I'm going to be going according to this, it's supposed to be 144 feet, 44.9 feet down. I think that should be right. Oops, not that one. That's the wrong map. Got it? Oh, thank you. 147 feet. 147.38. So that's about where it's going to go. And I'm going to click divide. So that's another way I could have divided. So now I've divided the parcel. However, doing the division this way, it is actually not splitting the line up on the left side here. This is an enhancement that we're actually working on that will allow for that to happen. But the other thing is doing the division of the lines, you get that extra bit of accuracy of actually dividing the line and splitting the lines up into those two separate pieces. You're able to do the traverse to see the redundancy of how accurate the actual measurements are on the plat. If I'm just drawing that, I could also have just taken the split tool and interactively just split across the parcel, and it would have split the parcel the same way as well. But it's just sometimes having this extra bit of redundancy helps maintain the accuracy of the data.
And I have to say that corner should align if you look at the survey.
It does, yeah.
And it doesn't because of how it was created.
Yeah, and I could have actually done the split tool where I not divide, but I could have done, what's it called? Split. And I could say that it starts here. And I can go into these actual tools here. Like this is kind of a cool thing too. I can go into these on-screen constraints. This is a thing you can turn on at the bottom here. It's called constraints. And while in the map, I can actually go into these fields and edit them directly here. So in this case, I'm going to be going in a northwesterly direction. So that is, so I'm going to go 81.54.08 to the northwest. So that's 4. I'm going to hit enter, which brings me into the distance field. And in that case, I'm just actually going to not enter the distance because 314 feet is probably not going to be exactly on that line. So since I know the distance or the direction, I'm kind of locked in right now. You can see the directions. I can just go over here and click on that line, and now it splits that parcel. There's no line created here yet because we split the parcel. So now what I need to do is I need to click build again to then create a line feature in here. Here my selection. What do? We created a tax line. Oh, I created the wrong line feature
that's missing.
Line type just is not identified.
Oh, line type's not identified.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Got it. So I could have just done attributes, and it's under line type, public.
Something.
There we go. There we go. Now we're good. Then I can go in and attribute that line work as well. What was the question?
So build creates the feature that's missing. If you add the lines, you hit build, it creates.
Actually, it did create the line. When I did the split, it actually did create the line. I thought it didn't. I thought I just split the polygon. But since I had an active record, the split tool became parcel aware too. So when I split the parcel, it then created the line on it. But it didn't know which line to create. So it just created a line from that line, that feature class that is associated to that parcel. And then I had to just apply the line template that.
So I didn't have a default value set, so it just made it.
It just made it in that one so that it still caught it. I thought for some reason it's a topology error. I was like, what is happening?
We like it that way because it double checks us.
There you go.
editing.
As I say, the redundancy is always a good thing when entering in a lot of this data, like you having this redundancy of like having checks within your data to flag certain errors or certain things that people may have forgotten.
So did that answer your question?
And of course, this line has no COGO values in it. Let me go back to here. Well, actually, it does have one COGO value in it. It has that direction I entered, because when I went into that on-screen constraint and typed in that value, it does take that value and place it onto the direction field. Since I just simply clicked to make the split instead of actually typing the distance, there was no distance created in there. So I could just go back into here and add 314.52. Now making that line having its full COGO attributes.
So is there a field in the line work that tells you how you constructed it?
There is.
And
Yes.
so one of your distance is actually done based on others, and the other is essentially key punched. What value goes into that COGO type? Is there anything entered?
Good question. Let me see. So this one over here. So this line over here that I created, this one is set as entered, because in this case, both the direction and distance were entered. So therefore the COGO type has been set to entered. Over here, since there's only kind of halvesies, nothing was set as a COGO type. But since I went back in and edited it in, I could simply, this is a user editable field. I can switch this over to entered. There are some other lines here. Good call on that, Dean, because then I can go up to this line up here and let's take a look at its value. Its value is set to computed. And the reason why, and the reason why that was is because I took that line, which was originally entered, and I divided it in this direction. So this line over here will probably be set to entered because I chose 139.17 feet off of that line. So it knows that I entered in that value of 139.17. It then computed the distance and direction of the remaining line onto that line. I mean, it's very accurate because the math was solid on it, but it's still showing you that that line, that 684-foot line, has been computed. The other option is from geometry. And that happens if I just had a line feature and I delete and it didn't have any COGO measurements on it. And I ran, let's say, update COGO. And then it basically took that geometry of that line and took the COGO, derived the COGO measurements from the geometry. Then that COGO type field would be set to from geometry. It's all good questions. Anybody else have additional questions? How are we doing on time anyway? We said it one.
It's been about an hour, not quite.
Cool.
Questions?
Yes.
So obviously we have not added map number, tax lot number and all that. That's kind of outside the bounds of this. But at this particular point, have you committed everything to history or?
Yeah, we can take a look at the history again. I still haven't done the top split here, but let's look at how all the historical transactions have transpired now. If I go to tax lot and turn on history, I can click here and I can see we have our historical parcel, which was the original one that existed there. If I click down on this area, you can see I still have the big tax parcel because it's in that area. And then I have this parcel. That one has also been retired. And in this area, I have the big one and that small tax parcel. And what's interesting is there's some other new features in Pro 3.2 is where it began, is that I could take this parcel, this new one that I created, and I can go to the quality tab and I can click, it's records tab, and I can say parcel lineage. And I want to see the lineage of this record, and I'm going to click create. This will actually show me a little lineage table of the history of those parcels. So it's just kind of a fun thing. This is utilizing existing tools within the software. These are called link charts. So you can see that this is not set here because I didn't name any of these parcels. If I'd have named them, that'd have been actually looked a lot better. But we can see that this record here created this parcel, which then was retired by this record that created this parcel, that was then retired by this record that created two parcels. So just,
Jason, is that dynamic each time you run it, or is there some table that stores it all and it's just recalling from that table?
where you're saying is this is dynamically generated. All it's doing is it's utilizing this functionality that's already there called link charts. You can see it actually opened up a link chart tab on the top. And I can take these things and I can move them around, and it's basing it on these fields actually. So if I click on this parcel, the small one here, and go to attributes, it has a GUID on the created by record field. And if I go to the retired parcel, the smaller retired parcel here, you see it has a GUID on the record field and a GUID on the retired field. Those GUIDs are associated to those records. And that's how the link chart is basically being created. Yeah, so you can see the history in a little bit more of a visualized form using these link charts. And this is a new feature at 3.2.
So we were talking at lunchtime and, great, I can see all the historical stuff. Why do I care about the historical lines? And the historical points that go with them? It just seems like a lot of stuff.
That's fair. I guess it's all based on what is required by the I don't know, the end user in that sense. And the historical lines, when I merge, if I have two parcels next to each other, we can actually do that right now. We'll just turn off history. Let's go to this area here. I want to merge these two. The owner of this parcel bought this one, so I'm going to merge these two tax parcels into one. So I'm going to create a new record. I'm going to call it M and then some numbers. And we're going to say this is what would this be? A combine. All right. That's a lot of dots on combine up there, wasn't there? Or there was one dot on combine. One dot. So you're getting your one dot's worth here. So I'm going to select these two parcels. And since I have an active record, the merge tool is now parcel aware. And I want to, I don't want to use a template, but I want to keep the original. I want to keep all the address or all the information of parcel 300 here. I'm going to merge it together. You can see that line disappeared. Now your question is, why do you care about that line after it's gone? This is just this line was recorded at one point, and it has all that recorded information. So if I turn on history, you can see not only the lineage is not only maintained on a polygon basis, it's maintained on a line basis. And I'm not just saying like every line of those two parcels are retired. Only that one line was retired, meaning that if I look at this parcel and look at its surrounding lines, the lines along the edge of that parcel were surveyed back when those two parcels were surveyed back however many years ago. No new survey was generated of those lines when I did that merge. Only that line in the middle was retired. So those lines of this parcel here, if I looked at this line, this 128-foot line, and I look at its attributes, its record is still associated to that record from whenever that was created. It's not associated to this merge record that I just created because nothing happened to those lines. And the same thing goes for when I did these splits over here. Turn off history. When I took this parcel, the one that was underneath this one, and I said copy lines to, it did copy all the lines to the active record. But once I did those divide to these, like when I divided this line on the top, that line, that full length line now knew it needed to be retired, and there are new lines created. So this line here, this 684-foot line, if I look at that, that one is associated to that 15 partition plat. However, this line that's down here, it's 258-foot line, that line wasn't touched during that split transaction. So when I said build, when I built those seeds, it took a look at that line and said, was this line modified? I know this line is currently part of the active record, but was it modified by the active record? No. Okay, we're reverting it back to the previous record that was the one that created it. So I can see on this parcel the lineage, not only polygonally, but I can see it of all the lines and how they were created and when they were retired and by what. So that's where that comes from.
I have a question, which is,
Yeah.
well, it might be outside the scope of what we're covering today, but especially knowing the data. You were, doing a great demo, but because of it, you went from partition plat 2024 or 3,
Mhm.
whatever, 15 to 17. We haven't done 16 yet.
Oh, yeah.
And they have shared borders.
Mhm.
Is there a way to go back to fix things so that the lineage hits correctly since you
Since I went
worked
out of
them out of
order.
order? Because I know that's one of those things that I'm concerned about when you have things all
What would
together.
be out of order that you'd be worried about? in that
That'd be
case?
tax lot lines would be
So you're saying that-
manipulated separately.
I see, so.
You have a
But it
tax lot
shouldn't-
line that's odd. So this tax lot line was retired by a record, but it really wasn't. It was
Oh,
retired by the one before,
I
but
see.
we ran it afterwards, so now I'm out of sync.
I see. If you were out of sync, yeah, there's ways to go back through these. I could take this line that was retired if I turn on history again. I
Just
could
manually
find,
change the
yes.
retired by.
Yeah, you could do that. I could take the historical line. I could set it as current again and then switch over to that other record and then click set historic. So I could retire it by its proper record. Or find the GUID. And copy paste it in there too. That's always fun as well. So. All right, good questions. Any more questions? And I mean, the last division that I had here was dividing that top parcel. There's not too much difference in it. We thought you. That one. I did have it.
So that one.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, I printed out a couple of these just for if people wanted them. I think of a fun thing we could do with this one. So we can just go through it. It's only 2 lines that are created on this one. So I'm going to, when we turn off history, create a new record. That kind of hammer home the record-driven workflows here, 2023. And it's going to be 0016. And it's going to be partition plat. Click create. And for this one, let's switch over to PDF. For this split, I just need to go from this line to the west and then down to the bottom. I need to divide this line here. And this is the example you're saying that this line was retired improperly at that point by the wrong record. But I'm going to take this parcel. I'm going to say copy lines 2. Copies all those lines. I'm going to take this one here and I'm going to say that it's do a division on this. Not division. Divide. You can go to in this case, I'm going to go from the start of the line. Actually, I'll go from the end of the line and I'm going to go 613.2 feet. Puts it right there, which I don't think is right. It's probably because I did it out of order. So I need to take 613. Pull up the old calculator here. 684.03 plus 139.17. And then I'm going to do, what am I doing here? I think of the best way to do this. So,
It'd be easier to.
oh yeah, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. So I will go from the start of, I'll go from the start of the line. This goes to show that if I did this in the proper order of the plats, this would not have been a problem. So 210 feet from the start of the line. That seems divide. There we go. So 474. All right. So then this, I need to do the traverse. We're going to set our starting point to here, set our closing location to here. And once again, we'll just go ahead and enter in the values. I can utilize on-screen constraints to do this as well. I could have done the clicking in the map and entering in the data that way, but once again, they won't snap to those points. So for this one, it's going to be 88 feet or 88 degrees, 57 minutes, 27 seconds to the northeast, which is 4, or not northeast, to the southeast, which is 3 at 71 feet. And other things you can do here for, I'll just show this right now. I show you, you could do additions and subtractions in the distance field. In this area, I can actually do additions and subtractions by degrees. So if let's say this was going to be a 90-degree difference, I can say plus 90. And then I'll just actually add 90 degrees to that bearing that was currently there. So if I typed in a distance here, you can see that it's actually a 90-degree angle on that one. So just other little like tips and tricks. Where to find all these tips and tricks? If you go down here to the learn more information about entering in traverse dimensions, click on that link and it brings you to our help page where you can find like examples of entering in different traverses. And if I scroll down, you can see some of the keystrokes, the quadrant bearing shortcuts, closure shortcuts. So for example, if my line itself didn't quite close, let's say it was outside of the 1 foot tolerance, but I was like, well, this is what the survey says. There's nothing here. I need to force this to close. I can put a little star at the end of the distance field and it'll force that line to close to my closing point or back to my point of beginning. I can do it that way, or there's also in the menu button up at the top of the traverse pane, you can say force closure as well, and that'll force it closed. Here are the shortcuts for angles. You can add or subtract angles, and for direction, you can do directions for like if you just did a plus without 90, it actually would just do 90 degrees, and a minus will do a minus 90 degrees. Didn't even have to type in the number 90. I could have just done plus. But if I did like plus 37, that means it'd have done a 37-degree deflection from that angle that was previously there. And then the calculator shortcuts here, plus, minus, multiplication, division, these can all be done in the direction field or distance field. Curve overrides, if I'm doing a tangent bearing, radial bearing, a chord bearing, those can be done in the bearing fields. And then in the length field, you can do C, D, or A representing chord length, delta, or arc length. And then the distance overrides, we got the simple ones for meters, kilometers, feet, yards, etc. So we can go back to this one. I can change this value here back to the proper value, which is 01-02-52. And this is going in the southwest, so that is 3. And finally, the distance is 420.55. I did notice that this one had a higher misclose. Maybe I entered in something wrong here. I don't remember it being this high. 88, 57, 27, 01, 02, 52, 420.55.
Is it maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because I remember it closed properly, but it had a high misclose and actually it didn't actually close properly. So you can see in this case it actually overshot it. So I could put that, we can show this example here. I can put a star here and then hit enter and it'll actually force the closure.
So when I go to the closure tab,
Yep.
What's it going to tell me?
Right now I have it's doing a compass closure method. I could actually just apply all the error to the last line. So there's a 2 foot,
Okay.
2.5.
So I could force it by doing the star, then I can just go in the closure and force it.
Yeah, so I can force all my error to be on that last line. Or I can change my different closure methods from compass and transit and Crandall. So. And then with that line, you know what, I think I know what the reason is. Let me go back to, I think this line was supposed to be northwest. I think it's going in the wrong, I think I may have entered the wrong, it's
Wrong quadrant.
wrong quadrant for that one. That would have actually fixed it, because it just needs to be a little bit higher. So we can okay, let's just say that happened and I've closed the traverse pane. Now what do? I gotta wait for this thing to go away. There we go. Let's go back into traverse and let's fix this. So I don't have the traverse here anymore, but I can trace it in. So I can take these lines and I can trace it back in. So now we've got them back again. And so I said this one is southwest. I'm probably supposed to be northwest. And then we said the closing location was here. And there we go. That's a better misclose. 0. It's perfect.
Did on purpose to show the tool.
Yes, there we go.
But the traverse tool is you're both entering, but it's always comes up, you can use it to modify.
I can
just
use it
the
to
same as
modify
entering.
as well. Yep. So I can retrace in a traverse that already exists and modify it, and it will adjust those lines. And in this case, now we have no misclose. So that line has no error on it. So there we go.
To retrace that, so you took the Traverse tool. and
Yep.
then-
Let's do it. I closed the traverse tool right now. So I just went, I opened the traverse tool and then I clicked trace lines.
Oh, right there.
And then once I'm in there, my cursor changes and then I can trace along existing lines. So I could, so I just started, I clicked just somewhere here in the middle of the line. And then it knew that once I got over here, it's like, oh, you wanted that whole line. You can't just get half a line. So to get that whole one, and I could simply stop clicking here because then it's going to be like, oh, you want this whole line going here, going all the way down. So when I click, it brings those 2 lines into the traverse. And then what I had to do, it knew that my starting point was here. I just wanted to go and set my closing point just so that it knew where it was ending to here. And then it showed and then I edited the lines.
If I had traced and ended at an endpoint, would it have done the endpoint for me, or do I have to set the
No,
endpoint?
you have to set because you may have, let's say it was
I-
like, yeah,
Why
yeah.
not?
Yeah, the endpoint, the closing point isn't going to be set because it doesn't know prior to it that was where you were wanting to close. You could have been halfway done with the traverse and you're like, I'll get back to this tomorrow, and you shut down for the day and you got back in, you trace it back in, then you just have to reset your closing location.
So when I have my subdivision, I'm chasing down an error. The trace tool is my tool of choice.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is a good one.
Very cool.
And if the closing location is in the wrong spot, you can always set it in a new spot. And the other thing is, if you right click on the map, you do have the ability to do absolute XYZ. So if you're doing an open traverse, or even if you're setting your start point, you have the ability to do absolute XYZ, which allows you to type in the actual XY coordinates to place that start point or closing point. More questions. I mean, we've done a lot. We've shown a lot, and like a lot of this stuff has been off script here, like just finding new ways to fix errors and find issues with the data, or find issues with the way I entered the data.
Is there functionality within Traverse to enter in spiral curves?
Yeah, not within the traverse, no. The only way to enter in spiral curves currently is by manually entering in the lines, and gosh, spirals are, I always forget how to do these. It's let me click on create the line, and there is spiral curve. There it is. And then you have that there are the parameter on Kogo lines. They do have 2 radius values in them. So this information will be stored within the line attributes of the radius 1 and radius 2 for spirals.
And that storage is pretty much the same as the ArcMap storage used to be.
Yeah, if you look at any line, let's go to tax. Gotta close this now. Go to tax slot lines, data design fields. And we've got these are the features, the fields that get added to a line feature class when you Kogo enable it. Is direction, distance, radius, arc length, and radius 2. So having these fields and all being double fields, that's what makes it a Kogo enabled feature class, and those are how we maintain those values.
And then if you can go, because this is something that's come up, you can display how many significant digits by right clicking on numeric, and and the same with bearing and distance. You can display the bearing and distance with difference as well.
Yes, yeah, you can change it here, the numerical formatting. You can also change the maps representation of them as well with the backstage properties, like the units. Where's that? Options. Here you can change the distance units and the angular units of the map or the project itself. So these are all project-based settings, and the other ones are data set or map-based settings.
And in the sample data set, we gave it the best shot, but no guarantees. We did what we thought was right 2 years ago. And if you see something you want to change, let me know and I'll change it.
So with that, I can click out of this line creation. I can click create seeds and build.
Can't see your points.
Yeah, that is the data here. It's just how it's being displayed, the symbology on here.
So if you go to the subsection not found, or no, at the bottom, all other values, you
Yeah.
can just symbolize in all other values.
Let me get into this thing again.
Go to the top and say corners, go to right click symbology. And now you can go down to other and
And give it a,
give it a whatever you'd like.
there they are.
Yep. When we did this, that's a great point. I'm sorry, that was bad.
No pun intended.
No, none. I'm incapable of doing that kind of thing. So, when we set this up, we didn't know how best to symbolize those. So in the sample data set, they're just not symbolized. It's not meaning that they're not important. It just means that we didn't know how to symbolize them. And when we've been looking at conversion, which is another side of this, is that what you'll see here is these are all of your control points following the standard symbology we've talked about forever or pretty close. And all of those, when we convert control points, we typically convert them into fixed position points. But what I've found in working with different counties is that seldom are the points that you have on your maps actually control points. They're more like guidelines, they're cartographic placements. So there's been a number of folks that we actually don't move your control points into the points layer. Because when you move them into the points layer, they're part of the fabric. So we actually ended up making a corners layer, and corners is where all your cartographically placed corner points that you like to keep go. And all of your other points then are now going to be part of the construction. So we made a clean break there. So it's just something to consider when you're looking at points.
Yeah, we didn't do anything with those possible fabric points yet. They're kind of hidden. So we took the old photographic points from ArcMap and brought them over as non-possible fabric feature class, and we just keep that up. So we don't know what to do with possible fabric points yet.
And that's come up more than once. Fine, all those points are there. We don't really see them most of the time, and frankly, we don't care. Why do I care about points? And I assume other than least scores adjustments and temporarily using them in the links, why points?
Once again, it really depends on the business too. Like in many other countries, coordinate based is the primary method of data entry, where all the points is basically how they're starting with their data entry. It's not bearing distance approach. It's like, I've got this GPS coordinate for this point, and that point, it needs to be represented by all the corners. And the other reason, technically speaking, to have the points there is mainly for connectivity between parcels and lines and neighboring parcels as well. So you're moving the point, it's moving the lines and the polygons with it and keeping those things intact. Points we don't stack points. Points are basically like, you can just think of it as a giant pin that's being struck down in there, and that's what's holding everything together. Even if I have stacked parcels on top of one another, the points, there's still just one point representing each corner. And those are just kind of like the glue of the parcel data.
So even though I'm not seeing them, they're the glue. And I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
I like to echo in here about the fact that, so when we had our conversion, we have a bunch of points that could have been PLSS corner points, but we opted not to include them in the fabric because after talking with the cartographer and couple different people, it's like, well, this is the point that you have here in your surveyor data, but we have this one here. And it's all depending upon what point it's been seen and if it was ever updated in GIS data. Started to get really convoluted as to really which one really was the most accurate point within GIS data. Now within your PLSS, like corner sheets, it made some sense, but also sort of not. So we just left everything out. So we don't have any of those points in our data either that would basically be that glue to sort of hold everything down.
Yeah.
We have them as separate features.
And the design doesn't address that issue. The design assumes you've got points and it contains both. But what I've found since is that you may not want to do that. is that you want to make just a control layer. Your control is where your ArcMap control points went, and points becomes your fabric points, and you may not even want to symbolize them this way. You may want them symbolize them a completely different way, but just something to consider when you're moving data.
Trying to think of other things that we can show off right now. So we're about at the hour and a half, which I have allotted for.
You know, you finished early.
I know.
Well,
More
Can we
questions?
still see shrink to seed
Oh, yeah.
construction? That would be.
Yeah, so I didn't have anything prepared for that specifically, but we could try to think of somewhere where that would be something that would be a shrink to seed really. Let me check a couple of these. Let me show this tool real quick to see if we have any densified arcs here, which I don't think we do, but we have these parcel layers here, which are things you can add to the map so that maybe you want to see all the vertices of parcels, like see where all the vertices are at. This is just a layer that gets added, and I added on the tax lot layer. And then we can see that I can see where all the vertices are on the parcel. So I was just trying to see if I could find an arc that was densified, and maybe we could do a shrink to seed for a quality update on that one. Let's go.
I clean up all those, or I did for this day.
Oh, did okay.
It's not always the case, but yeah.
Let's just say that I entered in this measurement wrong, and I need to fix this data here. Like, let's say it's supposed to be 74 feet. But if I went here and I did why is this still staying? This like Zoom stuff is staying on my screen. Like, there it goes. Now it's gone. If I went into Traverse right now and I said my start point was, and I retraced this, and I set my closing point to be here, and I change this to 72, or let's just make it egregious. I'll make it 75 feet. You can see the lines moved. Let me force the closure. You can see the lines move, but the polygons are still there. So the way that if I back out of this, let me undo that change. We're back to where we were. What I want to do is to make sure that the polygons get adjusted the same way as the lines do. I can take these two parcels, and since this isn't necessarily a record-driven workflow, I can even do this without a record. And I can just go to the quality tab, and I can say shrink to seed. So those shrunk those parcels to seeds right now, and I can go back into the Traverse pane and trace this line back in like I just did, change this to 75 feet, which is, let me set that closing point back here at the bottom to here. I know this is going to be a lot of misclose, but let's just assume, let's say I'd done what I did before and I didn't catch it until later. And then now I don't even build active isn't available because I don't have an active record, but I can just say build extent, and that'll actually just build those parcels back to where they were. So this is all done without any active records. Those parcel polygons, the information on didn't change, no record information happened. This is more shrinking to seeds is usually done for like data cleanup purposes. Like, for example, I was looking for densified arcs. A lot of times you go in, you're like, oh, this curve is all just a densified set of lines, but I want it to be a smooth curve. So I would shrink the parcel down to a seed, fix the curve and rebuild it out. And then the parcel will just fit itself again.
So
Still part of the same record.
Yeah, the record in this case, the records never change, and this is all data cleanup. A lot of the tools that you'll notice in the ribbon, we have the two tabs. We have the parcel record workflows tab and the quality tab. Many of the tools in the quality tab are meant for those types of workflows that don't require a record. Like merge points, for example, if I've got a bunch of close points because of, maybe bad data entry, there's a few points that are really close to one another. I could select all those points and merge them into one of them and keep the information of one of those points. And that will adjust the data, like, because all the lines are focusing in on those points, it'll adjust it there. I can run the simplified by straight lines and circular arcs tool, which actually would be the way to fix some of those densified arcs, because this tool can run both on lines and polygons. So if I had a densified arc that was truly a densified arc, so it's one single feature with a bunch of straight line vertices, then I could run this tool and run it on both the lines and the polygons, and it'll actually smooth both the polygon and lines out.
The same way.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only problem would be is that if I brought in my data, if I brought in a polygon that had a bunch of small segments on the end and I click build, it would create lines for each one of those segments at those vertices. So this tool wouldn't work at that case. It needs to be one line feature that is representing the densified arc with a bunch of vertices in there. If it's a bunch of small line segments, this tool won't work. And then you'd have to go in
And Bryce, that's what you and I ran into with Slack. You have to dissolve your line, figure out how to dissolve your lines and.
Yeah.
So did your points move when you did that?
the internal point probably moved. We can turn those points back on. Let's take a look. Right click. Symbology. And all of the values. And we'll do these. Oh, look at that. It has 2 points. Interesting. Well, then this is definitely a good point or a good example of where so this moved over because when I click build again, that point wouldn't have gone with it. And a new point would be created.
So there are 2 lines now? Or?
No, there's not 2 lines. The lines would never we still just have the one line feature. But in this example, that point would have been an orphan point in this case. We are creating new tools to find and remove these types of points. So in this case, we'd have to have do we have anything on points here? We don't. To validate the topology, and if we had a topological rule that all points need to be covered by an endpoint, then it would find that and we could delete it at that point. That would work here. Validate topology. Oh, you might have a lot of rules in here that I don't know about. Where is the topology? There it is.
We don't apply topology.
Oh, you don't.
So the current topology is the ArcMap topology. And based on things we did in ArcMap at Polk County ages ago, my cartographers are afraid of applying topology rules for a lot of reasons. Topological creep being the primary one. So we actually run topology rules on a copy of data.
Okay.
And so it copies your selected features where it's the record or all the maps to a default data set, runs topology, and then you can view them and turn them on. So we just typically don't apply them in mass.
Okay.
And I apologize. That's why there's not topology in the lists.
Nice.
And again, that's just been an internal thing that goes back
I'm curious.
many years, 10, 15 years. So Phil, you weren't in grade school then, but close. No.
I am curious though if I noticed topology was off, like the actual trace lines. That my closing point to be that. Yeah, it still moved it without bringing the point. Interesting, yeah. So that would be a thing that creates an orphan point that you'd have to go back and clean up. But that's something that I would probably I'm going to take a note on something that we shouldn't do.
You have time. We have, Fabric team here. Great time to ask questions.
I'm just curious. I'm curious. Do you foresee any problems working with multi-part feature or by multi-part polygons?
You say that again?
Multi-part polygons.
Do we have you asking, do we have any issues with it or?
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know if there was any.
Well, there was a
Something
recommendation before conversion to get rid of your multi-part.
So the reason we get rid of it in the conversion is when you're bringing the stuff across to conversion, depending on how you build. One of the ways that we convert is you take the centroid of all the polygons and you use points in poly to generate your tax lots within the fabric. So we explode them all, then make the points and use that in the construction process. But once you've got them across into the fabric, then it's up to you. Do you want to maintain multi-part polygons, or do you want to make them as single part polygons and build multi-part as part of your conversion of the data to the public? And I think we have them joined, correct? We maintain multi-part polygons in fabric. Something we should test.
Fabric, yeah, we ran a tool to do it in ArcMap, but I don't know in fabric.
So, but we went over that. Maybe you want to repeat
Yeah, we
some of
can.
our conversations we had this morning on multi-part.
Yeah, multi-part parcels are supported within the fabric. You could have, especially if there's a parcel that's maybe being, bifurcated by a road, that you then clip into that parcel, and now the parcel is on either end of the road. That'd be a multi-part parcel. That's the same feature. So it's, and then exploding a parcel now is also a record-driven workflow. If you have an active record and you explode a multi-part parcel, then that multi-part parcel has now been retired by the explosion, and then 2 new parcels are now associated to the newly created record.
And in the same way, if you do a merge on the multi-part,
Yeah.
it's not part of the record as well.
Yeah.
It's just merge.
Yes.
So the multi-part issue is just a conversion issue.
We have done that as a conversion issue, yes. And again, there's different ways to convert. One of the ways to convert is to convert all your points and to convert all your lines, or convert your tax lot polygons in ArcMap to lines, and then build your tax lot polygons in the fabric using the centroid and the boundaries. That's just one of 3 different ways to convert to the fabric. But in order to do that, they need to be exploded first. Otherwise, you get bad results.
Okay. And then you have to remember to put them all back.
And then you have to remember to put them all back.
You could generate you could explode them, generate the centroids, and then merge those centroids together, right? Because then there'll be multi-part centroids, and then build that way, and then you have multi-part parcels after.
Could. I've never done it that way. I always make the polygons and then
merge them.
and then do the merge afterwards. So actually, I think we run dissolve
Mhm.
on the feature sets they want that define what makes 2 polygons the same.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah.
Hey, didn't we just make a modification? I don't know if it was 3.1 or 3.3 or 3.2, where when you explode a multi-part, we're actually keeping the history on that too.
Yeah, I just mentioned that too. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, didn't hear that part.
Yeah, no, that was a 3, I think it was a 3.1 or 3.2 enhancement that we did to the explode, making it record driven. Well, should we maybe we'll hand it over to
Hand it over to
Dan, and Dan go over a few things, and then we can still keep it open for questions for the remainder amount of time.
And we did have 3 or 4 on branch version as well.
Oh, okay.
So that if you wanted to do that later.
Yeah, I wanted to do that, Dan.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
It's got to be time for Dan to go to dinner.
Dan, we can go and kick it over to you.
You want to
Oh,
your screen?
I still got a meeting after this, guys. So-
What a guy.
So go ahead and share your
See.
screen if you want.
There it goes.
Okay, we got it.
You got it? All right. Yeah, so I knew Jason was gonna be covering a lot. So I didn't know exactly what to get into, so I'm gonna present. John, tell me if I hit the spot or I miss it here. Just for everybody's knowledge, right? And I know we spoke about this. I can turn on my camera too, so you guys can see me. I know we spoke about this when I was out there a couple of years ago. New to parcel mapping. This is something I cut my teeth on it back in 89, 90 in the coverage world, using COGO coverages. And then in 2000, we came out with ArcMap, but it wasn't until 8.3 when we actually had topology and everybody was starting to use ArcMap to actually edit parcels at that time. And then there was a whole lot of other stuff. There was the cadastral editor, there were survey analysts, there was a bunch of other tools that kind of came and went over the years. And we've taken a lot of what we learned out of each one of those different applications. and we've rolled it up into the ArcGIS parcel fabric. And that's what you see down here today, where we use the enterprise with Pro and the parcel fabric and store and share information through ArcGIS Enterprise as a feature service. So it's really come a long way. And when I cut my teeth back in 89, 90 on parcels, you know, some of the things that we wanted to do back then that we just were not able to do that we can do today is you know, mind-boggling from that perspective. You know, the things we're doing today we take for granted that were so challenging years ago. And I kind of see that's going to probably happen in about 5 years, right? There's going to be things that we're doing in 5 years that today, you know, we're saying, I wish we could do that. And 5 years from now, we're just going to be taking that for granted. I don't want to get too deep into this because I think everybody realizes this, that's in the meeting that we have here today. You know, it is a modern records solution, a modern land record solution. You know, it does one of the big things that, you know, we discovered over the years is it needs to work out of the box. I was on a call earlier today, and it's a client that's looking to migrate off their current system, which has a lot of custom code in it, a lot of custom development. So, you know, one of the problems is they see ArcMap going away. They have a lot of code. They don't have the time to write all this stuff to get it into Pro. And so they're going, you know, what can we do out of the box? And that's part of the reason of doing this, you know, let ESRI maintain the functionality and provide that information. And then you provide us with the requirements and hopefully we give you exactly what you guys need to perform your edits. But these are all the reasons that you would want to go with, you know, the parcel fabric. You know, it is out of the box. We do have that flexible data model. We don't have the local government information model out there anymore. Although I think the local government information model had a good place. It was a good starting place that got a lot of different counties and organizations speaking together. I feel compared to ArcMap, very easy to implement and learn. It's scalable from one to many. We have the built-in quality management. So all of these reasons we have to adopt the fabric is why you guys are here today, and I appreciate that. Oops, went back. You know, some of the benefits, the real big benefits, you know, the reason to go here. And this is something, like I said, you know, back in 89, 90, when I was cutting my teeth on parcel fabric, first thing I did when our editors needed to merge 2 parcels, I had them select the 2 parcels. And then I copied those into a historical coverage, right? I was doing the exact same thing, except this was all stuff that I had to write and implement for my organization rather than it just be part of the data model and out of the box. So historical parcels, I think, were a big thing. Not only the historical parcels, but the parcel lineage and what we're able to do today with the link charts. 3.2 is the first release that we have brought out the link charts. I heard and I wrote down a note. Jason, you were doing some edit and they were concerned that the order of the edit affected the lineage of that particular record or those parcels. And I've talked with some other clients who have said, I love the link charts. This is great. Now give me tools to fix it. And so now, you know, we just released it in 3.2. I'm hoping that we're going to start seeing requirements where people are going to want to start saying, hey, I used the link charts. I could see the history that's in there, but now I need to kind of reshuffle that history. This one came before that one so that we can correct it and then maybe have that update the lineage in the back end. So I'm starting to see new requirements coming out of just being able to actually show that. Being that it's a system of record, right? That is the whole reason that the parcel fabric exists, right? We want to be able to maintain as true to the record as possible so that when somebody comes in and starts saying that the data that you have on my property is not correct, you know, that we can defend that information and say, no, we can actually pull up the exact deed and show you exactly what it was written in the deed and show you that we have the measurements typed into the system and it's drawn exactly the way it was to the deed. So being able to defend that system of record is really important. And again, part of the reason for the fabric. So now Jason showed you a lot of stuff. I'm just going to show you guys what's coming up with 3.2, which is already released. But if you haven't gone to there, I don't think you guys have gone there yet. Have you, Dean?
Some of us have gone there and gone back.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it another time. But yeah, there's some really fun stuff in 3.2.
So the editing templates, right? So this was something that was pretty, and if those that attended the end of year meetup, I talked about editing templates and possibly storing that in your enterprise as a template for your editors to grab. But here we have some editing templates. One of the things we did was now that they persist in the traverse pane, but it also remembers the last layer used. And the reason you kind of saw Pro go away and kind of come back here is because it also remembers between sessions. So if you set up the layer templates and then what you were using in the traverse pane will be remembered even when you shut down Pro and bring it back in. One less thing that you have to go select when you're editing. The other thing was being able to reverse directions. And I think, Jason, you showed this in one of your demos where we can type in and we notice, oops, this was the wrong one. Let me come back here, say reverse direction, and then it'll redraw it and adjust the additional lines that are after that adjustment. So another request that was that came in.
One more thing
Sure.
Dan, about the like reverse direction. Another like tip for entering in traverses is that not only if you put the star key in the distance field, that forces closure. If you do the star key in the direction field, that propagates tangency. So for example, if I have a traverse that I'm entering in 5 lines and they all have the same direction, I can hit the star key on the direction field and hit enter to go to my distance field. And then that line will now be tangent to the line prior. So if I had 5 lines, they all have the bearing on it with a little star at the end. That means they're all propagating tangency. And if I look at that and I say, oh, halfway through one of them changes direction by 3 degrees or maybe 3 seconds, and that's the same for the rest of them. If I change the one in the middle to a 3-second change, that'll propagate down the stars as well. So it's just a quick way to propagate the tangency through the lines.
Which is a time saver.
Yeah.
You're not having to go back and redraw everything.
I think that one's 3-1, I think.
I think that was 3-1. That was 3-1. Highlights, gaps, and overlap tool. This is a tool that has become very popular. And then again, once that tool's out there, people start asking, hey, this works great, but can we start using it among different layers and between the different layers in the fabric? So at 3.2, we now have the ability to highlight gaps and overlaps within the same parcel type. But then we also have the ability to use this with the visible layers, right? So if you want to check between your lots and your parcels, just make sure those are the 2 layers that you have visible. Or between subdivision lots and parcels, make sure you have those layers visible. And then also people were asking about the ability, well, I want to only specify gaps or I only want to specify overlaps. So you can see when we get up here, we can actually specify that now by clicking those checkboxes on and off that either I want to use gaps only or overlaps only. But this tool will continue to evolve as we continue to get feedback and is a very popular tool, or people are really liking using it. Parcel record control. I think we can probably attribute this to Dean almost. Being able to get to the record information from Python within the I'm losing my terminology here, within the document framework, so that I can go out there and see what record is active, or get the global ID of that particular record, or toggle the show only active on a particular record. Dean, I think this was you that had asked for a lot of this access.
I like it. Thank you very much. It's very nice.
So you can see that your ideas do get implemented. So wanted to throw up the roadmap and just talk a little bit about what we have also on the roadmap here. So Parcel Fabric online deployment. That is something that I'm hoping to see in 2024. I don't know if we're going to see it in the June release or if it'll be in the fall release. But I'm hoping to see that we have the Parcel Fabric available as an online deployment. That will be just like you would do any other geodatabase. You can take a zip file and copy it over to ArcGIS Online. It's going to unzip it and publish it. And then you'll have access to it. And then if you're using ArcGIS Pro, It will basically rehydrate your topology and everything else so that you guys can go in there and do your edits and store that information just against ArcGIS Online. It's not for everybody. Those, does not have versioning. There's a couple other things that ArcGIS Online doesn't support yet. But it is something that for a few counties out there that do not have the ability to stand up an enterprise, will make sense for them to start implementing. Additional enhancements come into the Traverse tool. So people have been asking for the ability to have row line our row numbering on the lines within the Traverse tool. Also being able to resize the font. And hopefully in 3.3, you'll see in the little hamburger, you have the export to Traverse file, import from Traverse file. I'm hoping that you'll also see an import from deed on there, which will allow you to point to a PDF of a deed file when it'll then go through and OCR that particular document and look for the meets and bounds information in there, and then populate the Traverse tool with that information. So hopefully a way to speed up data entry for you guys. As some of this information and as some clients are wanting to do more of what they call digital submission, they have been requesting for more and more tools to come in that are only available on the toolbar, but then to be made available through geoprocessing tools. So there's going to be a series of tools that you'll see coming out that are going to be geoprocessing tools, such as the select parcel features, enhancements to the simplified line and create circular arcs tool, or the Slacker tool. And then also being able to call the highlight gaps and overlaps. And some of the things we're looking in there is some people want to kind of write out the error features and things like that. We definitely do not want to replace topology. Topology is still there for that, but there are some requests that we're getting in that are kind of mirroring some of the functionality that the topology does. And then also, it seems like every release, even though you don't realize it, there are enhancements to the aligned parcels. We constantly try to improve that based on feedback. And then, one of the feedbacks that we had, and again, this relates back to digital submission, is if we have a record that comes in and it has a connection line to the, from one section corner to the true start of a parcel, we also want to make sure that we can use that line in the alignment process as well. So you'll see some enhancements coming in from that. Parcel fabric topology enhancements. This is something that we've been looking at. I don't know, we have it here as near term, we have been looking at it, but if you have been working with Pro, and when you have one line feature that kind of crosses the other line features and it gets cracked, I may grab the end point of this line and expect that whole line feature to move, but what actually ends up happening is it just kind of bends where it was cracked. So we're looking at behavior in the way that topology behaves, and the way that people that edit parcels expect parcel boundaries to behave. And we're looking at making modifications to the topology model so that if I'm grabbing the endpoint of a line, even though it crisscrosses another one, that it treats it as the entire boundary and not just where it was intersected with the additional lines. And then Jason, oh no, sorry, that was on the other demo I was on earlier today. Copy parallel tool enhancements. So if I was to take two parcels and say copy lines 2, and then I take the one parcel that's splitting the two and say copy parallel, 20 feet over, especially if that parcel was on a curve, it may be overshot on one side, it may be undershot on one side. We think we can do better. We want to be able to copy parallel and then have it automatically do the, come back, bring back the overshoot and extend the undershoot so that it matches everything, so that when we can build and create the parcel. So less steps that you have to do when actually performing those edits. So midterm, what we're looking at is being able to support mobile clients. I know that's probably not a high priority for some of the folks up there in the ORMAP group, but the clients that I was working with today, all they capture is points. So kind of what Jason was talking about earlier, when they get a new record in, the examples I saw today, one example was just 6 points. So there was 2 points that defined, and then there was 1 point that kind of split that out, and that's the information they get in, and they kind of connect the dots. Kind of a different way of entering parcels. This next one, I think is something that we're doing along the lines of the import from deed, but there's a lot of scanned images out there, scanned maps that have a lot of information. So being able to take that data and bringing it in, kind of along the lines of if those some of you remember ArcScan, where we could take a document and then vectorize that information from the raster. We would like to do better than ArcScan instead of just getting line work out of that, right? You know, on these plat maps, there's tables, right? There's tables that say L1, L2 is this bearing and distance. You know, there's curve tables. C1 is this radius, you know, chord bearing, delta angle, and that type of stuff. So being able to also take that information and, you know, just scanning that in, but taking that information, creating the lines from it, and then attaching that information to it as well, so that we get usable, good information from it. And then, of course, 3D geometry, right? That's something that has been on a roadmap for a while. It's getting there. As soon as we can take 3D feature object layers and version them, which I know they're working on and getting close, we will be able to take that information and bring that in as a parcel type. And then you can also have true 3D objects represented your land records features. And then long-term, you'll probably hear about this, those of you going to UC this year, a parcel, well, I take it back, a web editing application that ESRI is getting ready to release. And then specific tools or widgets for doing parcel edits. I don't think you're going to see those particular tools in the first release of the web editor, but that is something that, you know, we're looking at where, you know, possibly software as a service. You come into the office and you're connecting to either your enterprise or maybe it's even an online deployment, and you have everything you need to edit your parcels. And Kubernetes, we've only had a few. Yes, sir.
On the widgets, is the vision that we'll have those widgets available for Experience Builder?
Yeah, John, there's so many up in the airs on that right now. That would be part of the idea though. So like maybe there's a traverse widget, right? And that's what, you know, if somebody wanted to build that for Experience Builder, they could bring in that traverse. But I can tell you that traverse widget is not going to be there for that first release.
Okay, thanks.
So but that's what we have on our roadmap.
Back to the roadmap a little bit.
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry, Dean.
11.2 patch that works with Clip is scheduled for when?
So I just had some emails going back and forth on that. It was supposed to be out, I was told, around mid-December. That's been pushed back. I believe they're doing testing this week, and they're hoping that by the end of this month, first week of February, if not sooner, Dean, that it'll be out by then.
It was a question earlier today, so thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was hoping to see that in December. So resources, where can I get more information?
Just sector.
Sure. Yeah.
What is ML? It said AI and ML, and also, when do you figure our jobs will be obsolete?
It'll never be obsolete. If you think about it, you know, ancient Egypt, they had the rope stretchers that used to go out there and measure the fields for taxation purposes, right? So it's been going on for thousands of years. I don't think our job is ever going to be obsolete. AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, you know, there's applications out there today that can take and vectorize scanned images, but it just does that, right? We just get lines, but we want to do more than that, right? We want to start using artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually look at the documents, interpret, find tables that have the line tables in it and the curve tables in it, and then, you know, look for those features within the map itself and say, okay, there's a line associated to C1, we must attach those attributes to that. So taking it beyond, you know, what we're doing. I don't think that's going to make our jobs obsolete, though. I really don't. It may make it easier, but I don't think it'll be obsolete. And, you know, these guys were supposed to make my life easier. I think all they've done is make them busier. So the cell phones, you know, haven't made my life easier. They just made it busier. And I have a feeling that some of these tools we do will just make your life busier as well.
Other questions for Dan about the release list, roadmap?
And if there's something that you don't see on here that you think, hey, that would be great, ideas, that's where we need to put those in the idea site.
I think we're good on the roadmap.
All right. So if you're not part of the Parcel Fabric meetup, highly recommend it. We last year, I think, end of the year, Jason, I think we ended up with 14. It was either 13 or 14 that we ended up with.
Fans here, like how many people have, and how many people know about the parcel meetup here? Okay, so about maybe 60%. So
Okay.
those who know about it, hopefully you're all registered for it, but people who are do not know about it, please register for it today. It's free. Just you go to the meetup site here, Parcel Fabric Meetup. You can just Google that. It's free to join, and you'll get access. Actually, our community page actually has all our previous meetup videos. We record them all. And the reason why we can't stress the meetup enough is that if you're attending live, we post a lot of polls during these meetups where we ask questions of things that we want feedback on from the community. And these polls and these questions, they drive our development cycle. Our community site here, what people post on here will drive our development cycle and what we focus on next. It's what we strive for as a team, is just listening to the community constantly, and that's where you see a lot of these changes. And as Dan has pointed out, that we're always listening, and these are the areas where we listen, where a lot of our attention is given, is the community, the people in the Parcel Fabric community, the people in the Parcel Fabric meetup, voting on those little polls and stuff. And Dan, you even sent out an end of the year survey last year to some
Which is still open. I'm going to close it at the end of this month, Jason. So if they haven't received that, I can definitely get you guys the survey out there.
So Dan, if I sent you a link, we have a link of all the folks that is Phil and I do the GIS side. Phil's got most of the cartographers. So if we sent you a list, you could blast that out to everyone just to make sure everyone's being notified, both with this link and the link to the survey.
Absolutely, Dean. I would love that list. I can definitely send them the survey as well, so they can take the survey.
That'd be great.
That survey, we had 13 meetups last year. A lot of that was information that we got back from that end of year survey. What are the things you guys want to see in the meetups? And as a result of that, I think we already have we know of 6 subjects that we'll be presenting on this year. And we're hoping to get at least, another 5 or 6 to have, so that we get at least one a month in there. January this year is going to be kind of tough, so we'll probably have a month with 2 meetups in it. But I think it's a good way for us to communicate what we're working on, and then also to get the feedback from you guys. But these are the sites. So Parcel Fabric Meetup, when we finish that, we do take all those recordings, and you'll find them out here on the video site from our community page. And then on that community page, there's also, if I go back one, let's see here. There's the ideas page, ideas link right here as well. So if you go to our community link, there's the ideas. And when you click on that, that's where you could enter a new idea or upvote an idea. So if you see an idea that's out there and go, that is a good idea, go ahead and give it a kudos, because that is something that we keep track of as well. We look to see which ideas are being upvoted, and that's what gets priority in getting implemented in the system. And then the last thing I have was just, how to get started, which I think a lot of you guys are already there. I can't stress this enough. Watch the videos on the Parcel Fabric community site. I do that all the time. Jason, we were talking the other day where we were talking about the symbology thing or something like that. It's like, I had to go back and watch that video. So, it's something we do as well. Read the Parcel Fabric help documentation. And if you find something in there that doesn't make sense, or you go, I don't think this is right. Again, there's a link in the bottom of the documentation you can send a link to. You could do it to the ideas, or just shoot me an email as well. I'm constantly getting suggestions about the documentation. Most recent one was talking about when they're copying the data into the enterprise and it's talking about who owns the data and stuff like that. You know, could we have a link over to the enterprise site? You know, that kind of stuff is easy to do where we can link over to other documentation. And if it's helpful, then it makes sense. You know, we're happy to do that. But I know a lot of you guys are already done the prototype or the proof of concepts. Again, if there's missing something, let us know and we're happy to enhance the fabric for you guys. But I appreciate y'all's time.
Any other questions for Dan? I think we're good.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
I guess, if, we've got, what, another 25 minutes or so? It don't feel like you have to stay if you don't want. I know you've got other meetings and dinner to go to, probably.
Is that to the crowd or to me, John?
Oh, that's to you.
Yeah, don't leave.
Yeah. So, and we're recording this meeting, so at some point we'll have a link to all of this material. All right, so we got 25 minutes late. I was gonna, or left, gonna talk about branch versioning. Does everybody need to stand up and stamp your feet? That we are scheduled for a break at what, 3:30. Well, let me
You want to stand up while he's doing that and
I'll get
we'll
set up
get
here.
set up for that? Well, that was quick.
Oh, I gotta stand up. All right, so the content I'm going to show here is not specific to the land records, other than the introduction of branch versioning has is intertwined with the deployment for multi-user editing of the fabric. So if I can get a quick set of hands for folks that are using versioned workflows right now. Okay. And most of you are probably all based on SQL Server, I think, for that. Okay, so my intent here is to give, well, actually, can I get hands of folks that haven't ever done versioned workflows with it? Okay, so my intent here is to give a quick introduction to versioning in general, both what we call the traditional versioning, sometimes referred to as flat versioning, versus the new branch versioning stuff, and what the differences are, what are the key pieces with those. If you had signed up for some of our recommendations for training that was funded through the ORMAP effort over the last couple of years, we recommended that the GIS team who is managing your server, your enterprise environments, that at the very least that they take the one-day branch versioning class. I was still of the opinion that if you're an end user of versioning, that the experience between traditional versioning and branch versioning is not all that different. So if you're comfortable with traditional versioning, I think you'll be fine just going ahead, not necessarily getting the training. Branch versioning has significant differences for the folks that manage the enterprise and just the way the architecture, how it works behind the scenes. So what I have here is some workshops or material from workshops that Jack Horton put together. Many of you have probably had classes that Jack, he's a legendary instructor.
John, do you want to share your screen with Teams? Because it's not showing, you're recording your audio, but we don't see your video.
Very good. Let me get that set up here. Let's
The green button at the bottom.
yeah, there it is.
I'll let you know if I see it on my.
Okay, share screen. Oops, it's up there. Let me move this back over here. And no, actually the recording's got to be over there.
That's fine, because you can keep it on that screen if you'll choose which screen to share.
Okay.
Okay, let me click the green.
Share screen.
And you want to do screen 2?
Yep. Screen 2. And share.
All right, see it?
Okay. All right. Now I'll go back to the PowerPoint.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. So as I was gonna say here, Jack put this material together for some workshops that he did outside of the parcel fabric class that many of you are have taken. So these first set of slides is really how versioning works for those folks who are not aware of it. And then we'll get into kind of the differences between them. So when we're talking about version data sets, these are layers that are being hosted inside a relational database. So for most of you, not all of you, it's SQL Server. It is the most typical of that. And the idea here is that we're setting up an environment for multiple people to be editing a data set concurrently. So in other words, you're editing at the same time. And how do we manage those edits? And how do we resolve conflicts that might come up with those edits? But in both branch versioning and traditional versioning, there's this idea of the default data set. It's the top of the tree, if you want to think of it, I guess, or the root of the data. And as an editor, you can set up your own personal version that you do your editing work in. So in this example, we have Sue and Joe have spawned 2 child versions from the default. And they're both going to start working on editing. So as we progress through this, we're going to talk about reconciling and coding. So a reconcile, let me go back here a little bit. So let me start here. So both Sue and Joe in our example have made edits to the data set. And at this point, they don't see each other's edits, and the default doesn't see these edits either. So the process that gets involved here is called a reconcile and post. And the error coming down to Sue's version is the reconcile process. So basically, this version is being told to go up and check the status of the default that originally came from, and that's called a reconcile. And so, but Joe's doing the same thing. And then when Sue posts her edits back to default, that's when it started. That's when the edit is being put back or being put into the default data set. But at this point, Joe doesn't see it yet, and he won't see it until he does another reconcile. Okay? So these 2 versions, basically for them to see how they're working together with default doesn't occur until the reconcile. So this has been the case with traditional version as well as branch version. So here's a situation where now Joe, who made an edit, he's posted his stuff, and you can guess that when Sue does a reconcile, she now sees those edits. So at this point, all three versions can see the each other's edits. All right, so this is where we start to get into branch version. And there's a fundamental difference on how traditional versioning and branch versioning work. In traditional versioning, there was a whole bunch of tables related to your that were, when you created a version, there were tables added into your enterprise SQL Server database, and basically they keep track of the edits going on there, change adds and deletes tables is what they were called. And that's the way that we managed and kept track of everything going on. Branch versioning, a big difference here is we're now doing these timestamps. And I'm going to go through, we're looking at the same sort of pattern, but now what we're keeping track of is instead of the states being put into tables inside SQL Server, we're putting timestamps into the records that you are inserting or modifying or deleting. And these timestamps are how we draw the lineage of all these changes that are going on. So it's fundamentally a different system or how we're keeping track of these changes. One being, putting records in tables, and others making timestamps on the table. So it's a really different approach. So from an end user standpoint, it's not all that different. So if I go through this process here, as we move through time, these timestamps are going on. And in this case, Sue is doing a reconcile, and then she'll do a post at some point. Here we go, she's posting. So same end result, end user's experience is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and step through this more of these processes, and this what's a little different in this is that we may have another user editing default correctly. So let me jump to the section to get into more of the architecture of how this is put together and how it impacts you. And let's start here. Okay, so one of the nice things about branch versioning is it simplifies what's being done inside your enterprise geodatabase. A lot of the complexity of a version database has essentially been taken out of your SQL Server enterprise geodatabase, and it's being put onto the portal technology, which is built into ArcGIS Enterprise. So essentially, we have extracted a lot of that stuff that was in your enterprise geodatabase, and we're now keeping track of it inside of the portal. Now, when we talk about branch versioning and geodatabases, and this is true of traditional versus branch, is that the flavors of geodatabase that you have available to you have been the file geodatabase and the enterprise geodatabase. So many of you, I'm sure, have worked with file geodatabases. If you haven't actually looked at them when you were on your hard drives or wherever you're storing things, there are folders that have a whole bunch of cryptic files inside of it, but they fundamentally are files. And in a computer architecture, you can't, for the most part, you can't have more than one person editing a file at a time. And that's not just GIS data, it applies to Word documents, so whatever other documents you're working with. So the versioning technology does not, it's never worked with file view databases. It was always sorted in the domain, or it's in the domain of the enterprise geodatabases. So given that, when we're talking about Pro, no version there. With Pro, you're talking to enterprise geodatabase. So you can have multiple editors working in this environment, but they may not have been versioned. It could be the traditional version. Branch version edits not supported. Why is that? And that's because the type of connection between the client software, in this case ArcGIS Pro, and the enterprise geodatabase is fundamentally different. When you sat down with ArcMap, or you were working with Pro, and you were working with an enterprise geodatabase, it is a direct connection, a persistent direct connection. So you were essentially, when you started in the editing session, it was maintaining a pipe between the client software, ArcMap Pro, and the enterprise geodatabase, which SQL Server most of it. So that connection stays up and alive the whole time. And there's a problem with that, in that it's not a architecture that performs well when we start talking about web applications or mobile applications on your phone. Those fundamentally are web services. So web services are typically non-persistent connections. In other words, if you're on a web browser and you're reaching any web page, basically you're making a request from your browser to the server gathers the response page or whatever it is, and then that server forgets about that request. It just moves on to whatever it's the next request comes in. So there's no continuity of the connections typically for web services. So there's essentially every time you reach out to a server, even if you just previously made another page request, the server doesn't remember. Now, oftentimes when you connect to a web service, some of that information that's coming down is being about your request is being encapsulated in the response that's sent to you. So the next time you connect, it may have some idea of what your previous connection was. These are fundamentally different processing environments. So how do we get around it? So we are now using feature services, web services, to manage the back and forth of the data. And essentially these are non-persistent type connections. So this is the way of the world. This is how, you know, since what, mid 2000s, we are primarily interacting with our IT infrastructures is through web services. So where does this fit here? Is since branch versions are all about web services, this is where the portal is. This is what's if you want to think of it as kind of the go-between the enterprise geodatabases and whatever clients are using. And you can have any number of these connecting to your services. And they can have all kinds of different clients to it, and that's another important aspect of what we're doing is it's not just gonna be a heavy weight application like ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap. It's gonna be lighter weight options like web pages, web editing, mobile applications, things of that nature that are fundamentally built around web services. So if you were an ArcMap user, ArcMap came into existence in mid to late 1990s. There wasn't web services at that time. The fundamental architecture of ArcMap was never built with web services in mind. Now, over the years, we added on things that allowed you to access web services and display data from them. But at its fundamental level, it never was natively web services enabled. So for instance, if you're using ArcMap and you're working with a feature layer stored in ArcGIS Online, which is all web services, and you were editing that, what was actually happening behind the scenes is when you're editing that layer, ArcMap reached out, got a copy of that layer, brought it back, and made a scratch, filed you a database that was some cryptic file name on it. And that's what you were editing. And then when you publish those edits back, it would then, essentially take that version and overwrite the one that was up there. So ArcMap could never really, at a fundamental level, work with web services. Where Pro, when we worked on that, is all about web services. So again, more of this whole opening up the door and Dan's presentation on what's coming down the road. That was part of what we saw. There were the web apps and the applications. It'll be environments that other technologies can take advantage of. So you may be able to do edits, attribute edits in a canvas system that will be able to use the web services to update attributes in the environment. A lot of possibilities there. A lot of business partners are working on those kinds of things that you'll see emerge over the years. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, about 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, well,
Maybe 2.
let's get to the key things here. All right, so when you're working with feature servicing, and in this case, like with the parcel fabric, behind the scenes, there's actually 2 services being stood up. There's a map image layer service, which is a read-only environment, and it's basically the picture that shows up in your map. Behind that, in this case with working with parcel data, is it streaming the actual geometries through a feature layer service. So when I say a web service for parcel fabric, we're actually talking about 2 services that the software's combining together into your finished application. When you're doing edits, you're always going to have access to the feature layer.
This is cool. We were playing around, and one of the things we found out with that image is that when we're editing our version and doing all sorts of changes, and we go, well, how did the map look originally? Well, I'm only seeing my version, but I can bring up that image, and underneath I can see what my map looked like in the database in a read-only environment. So as I'm making edits, moving lines around and go, well, I might have made a mistake. What it looked like before, that other image is there. So some of that application fits really well with just different tools you want to look at.
So I'm going to finish up with these last 2 slides on the differences between them. So branch versioning is the minor thing. The big thing about branch versioning is it's scalable. the traditional versioning with those persistent connections. There was no way we could deploy those in an efficient, high performance environment under the persistent connection model with that. So you can see some of the other, you know, advantages to authentication, which you're really authenticating with a portal rather than the geodatabase. The geodatabase is still there, but the portal is making that persistent connection behind your firewall. So it's still there, but from a permissions access, who gets to edit, who can see data, it's being managed from the portal rather than from the geodatabase. We can also take advantage of some of the newer technologies like with the attribute rules. Service can be accessed through a firewall. So a persistent direct database connection will make your IT folks cringe if you try to push that through your agency's firewall. It's an insecure environment. We're just pushing with branch versioning, we're just pushing web services through the system, which is, you know, pretty much how everything is working these days. Let's see what else. Okay, let me go to this last little table you can take a look at, but behind the scenes you can see some of the detailed information about how these are put together. Already talked about scalability and speed. Let's see. One thing that can be a concern if you're moving from traditional to branch versioning is in traditional you could have the default with a child, and that child can have children. So it allows you to spawn additional versions. Branch versioning is limited to one level, so that default you can have any number of versions, but only at the next level down. So it's basically your children can't have children. But I'll make these PowerPoints. Jack has made a version that works real well in the PDF version that you can do all the animations, which I didn't really get into.
So if they have questions, so they go back and say, you know, I just heard I got to do branch versioning or SDE, and do they contact you and say, hi, can you explain some of this to our IT people? So that would be an alternative for
That would be a
moving
good
forward.
alternative. I think the geodatabase folks, or the enterprise, the GIS folks that are doing enterprise, should be looking at implementing branch versioning. Because everything is moving to web services and we're supporting all these web type clients, that the branch versioning is the direction that we're heading. We don't have any plans to cancel traditional versioning, but in order to expand access and also have it in a similar architecture for managing permissions as the portal environment. The branch versioning has a lot of advantages. Okay. And ultimately, it also makes the management of the data, like having to do compresses and folding versions back, was quite a bit of labor for traditional versioning, and the branch version is quite a bit simpler in that regards. So we've used up our 2.5 hours. If you have any further questions, certainly Ryan and I and Sarah are here. So if you're Ryan and Sarah are basically going to become the Oregon team along with John Ruffing. I'm retiring in the year, so I'm kind of hoping that I get introduced to everybody. So that's kind of a long-term vision. But certainly reach out to Ryan and I about technical issues.
So we're going to take a break. about 15 minutes, we'll be back and we'll go on data conversion from Douglas County. I'd like to thank you guys for doing this and coming up and making the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It was good. It was good questions.
Yeah, you
So-
had to do quite a bit of prep for that. Oh, before I forget. It's a gift.
Oh, okay.
So there's like
Okay. Don't forget to stop the recording there.
Oh, yeah, I gotta stop the recording. Right, let me go to Zoom. And stop sharing. And stop recording. Oops. Yeah, well, but I'm gonna do it properly.
Oh, you're gonna press.
Yes.